Hi guys! Welcome to my first wrap-up. I thought for a while about how I should format these wrap-ups because I read quite a lot, and so I figured that one video a month wouldn't be enough because it'd be too long. I figured doing them regularly wouldn't really make sense because I'm a student and workloads all they go up and they go down, and sometimes I'm just not reading. Sometimes I'm reading way too much. Screw scheduled wrap-ups. I'm just going to do several wrap-ups per month. Each clump will be maybe 5 or 6 books. If I'm reviewing a book, it won't be in a wrap-up. If I'm not, because I don't feel like I have really a lot to say about it or I don't really have anything to deeply discuss over it, then I'll just put it in the wrap-up video. I don't know if this will last, but I figured this is a good format to try out. So, onward! Let's do this! The first book I read was Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, and you've heard of this book. I'm sure you have. I'll put money on it. It follows 7 generations, beginning with 2 sisters in Ghana, one of which marries a slave trader and the other of which is sold as a slave. And then it follows their families, subsequently down the generations, and their stories, while discussing things like the guilt associated with Ghanaians, and knowing that their profit and their success came off the backs of other Africans, or what it is like to grow up as an African American in the States, and what that's like, and what is your heritage, because at a certain point you're disconnected from it, because as a slave, your family ties are almost nothing. They're broken just like that by your employer, not your employer, sorry, by your owner. And so it explores a lot of different things very, very well, I think. Reading this book, I was laughing, I was crying, I was feeling a lot of emotions, and when I finished it, I really felt like I had a lot to think about. I would recommend reading this book. I don't think it was my favorite, not by any means, only because, and now people have mentioned this as well, is that because you have 1 chapter per person, you don't have a lot of time with each character, and I feel like sometimes the character that you meet is shallow in their depiction, only because you don't have the time to meet this character, to acquaint with this character, it goes through their primary struggle, while also, learning what the author wants you to learn and considering the themes that the author wants you to consider. There just isn't the time. So I actually think this novel would have deeply benefited from being 100 pages longer, which isn't something I would normally say about anything ever. It's definitely worth the read. It's not perfect by any means, but it did a really, really great job of conveying the themes it wanted to convey and getting the message across that it really wanted to and needed to. So definitely something that was worth reading, and I think worth the hype. Next book I'm not going to talk too much about because I am going to make a review for it on my Bronte Breakdown segment. This is the story of Agnes Grey. She is a pastor's daughter who decides to become a governess. So she governs one family of really bad children, and then she governs a family of is that the right word? And then she takes care of a family of better children, and then she meets a man. That's kind of the plot of the book. Very, very little happens. I enjoyed reading it, but I don't know why, because nothing was really happening. Agnes as a character is not engaging. It's a coming-of-age tale in the sense that she, goes out into the world on her own to make her own fortune and to support herself and be independent, but at the same time, Agnes from the beginning of the novel, from Agnes to the end of the novel, is exactly the same person. I don't know how many years have passed, but several years have passed. She'd gone through this, through these grueling experiences, but she really they hadn't changed her in any way, so it's kind of, Agnes is kind of a perfect character from start to finish. I'm not just saying bad things about the book, but I really enjoyed it. I think because it was so comforting and I just enjoyed it. And I can't recommend it because I don't think a lot of people would enjoy it. I think a lot of people would find it quite dull, honestly. But I liked it, and I liked the commentary it had about religion and about class and how, the children that she was governessing, I don't know this word, the children she was looking after, looked at her as a person, how the children's friends treated her, because she technically to them is lower than them in a different class, and so the way in which they treated her was quite interesting and quite revealing and fascinating, and I liked it. Next book is Madame M. Butterfly by David Henry Hwang. I read this book for a course in school, so this is a play, and it's quite short, and so this is the story of a man who falls in love with another man who is a communist spy who has disguised himself as a woman to get information for the party. And so the play is kind of odd structurally in that Gallimard, the main character, is narrating it, and so he is talking to us, the audience. But this is also all in his memories, so his memories fade in, the memories fade out. The character is a little bit more meta than most characters are, and it's very, very interesting. I didn't particularly enjoy reading it. I don't know why, it just didn't really vibe with me, I guess, but it's a really, really fascinating book to study, because what it does is it equates the Western view of Asia and Orientalism as feminine and weak, and it talks about how, you know, the Western man, or the average Western person, wants to see Asia or the surrounding areas as weak and submissive, because that's just the racist stereotype that we have grown accustomed to, and that benefits us. Equates that to the way in which a man might want to feel about a woman, and how he sees her as submissive as well, and weak, and him as dominant, and how, you know, putting her down makes him feel better about himself. And that comes together in how Gallimard views Song, the woman, or the man who dresses up as the woman, because his perception of her is the perfect woman, who is Asian, weak, mild, and that makes him feel better, that makes him feel stronger. And so this really interesting discussion of gender and racism and how those things intertwine and are similar and how they're different, and relationships. It really does pack a punch for a 100-page play. I would definitely recommend reading it. Definitely recommend, you know, if not studying it, then considering some of the themes it brings up, because I feel like the experience I've had post-reading the play was superior to the one I had while reading the play, because there's so much to think about and really consider. The next thing I read was a collection of poems called Hold Your Own by Kate Tempest. This collection arises from the tale of Tiresias, who I believe, I'm just gonna read off the back because it says it all for me very well. So Tiresias was born a man, and he died a man, but he also spent years as a woman, and he was blind, but, you know, he was a prophet, so he was able to see things others couldn't. And that's the premise of this collection, where it's the story of, you know, flipping from gender to gender, the differences of genders, and it talks about youth and being a woman and being a man, and it tries to be above the distinction of woman's perspective or man's perspective, and it tries to be perceptive and thoughtful in a way a prophet would be, and, you know, tell the whole cold hard truth about society. And I don't know, lots of people love this. I know that a lot of people who don't necessarily like poetry adore this. I can't say I'm incredibly experienced with reading poetry. I've studied it for school, I've read it on my own sometimes, but I'm not necessarily the person who reads a poetry collection a week. But I was engaged on reading the poems. I found them interesting. There were elements that I found really beautiful. Her prose is beautiful. Sometimes she says something and I stop and I look at it, you know, in the way that good prose makes you think. She, I believe, is a rapper and maybe a slam poet, and so that really comes across in her writing. And again, it's very lyrical, it's very well structured and formatted. But I think my issue with this collection is that I would finish a poem, I would think about this poem, and then I would say, so what? Because she says something, and she gives you some kind of revelation, or she tells you something, or she describes an incident, and I'm left sitting there like, why did you tell me this? You know, what was the point of you going out and telling me this thing? Maybe that was my own fault, and that was just a lack of analysis. You know, I'm not comfortable enough with poetry to say that, you know, this was just shallow. This didn't make me think in the way I wanted it to. And so for that, you know, it was mediocre. If you've heard of it and it sounds interesting to you, and if you like the premise, then I would go for it, because it is kind of interesting. It does explore gender and society, and it talks about things in interesting ways, but it wasn't for me. And the last thing I read was a short story collection called Blue Beyond Blue, Extraordinary Tales for Extraordinary Dilemmas, Extraordinary Tales for Ordinary Dilemmas, and this is by Lauren Slater. I really love this. This is a short story collection of I hesitate to say feminist, but this is a short story collection of fairy tales, but they're all reworked. If you know the tone of a fairy tale, it's kind of timeless, right? This is the same way. The tone of this book is the same way, but incorporates a lot of different modern references to things, so you might get like a sentence that has Prozac and horse carriage in the same sentence. It's all very timeless, and the stories are modern, but sometimes they're not, and sometimes they are, and it's just such a wonderful interweaving of time, and it's really nicely written. I've read, it's such an odd thing to say, but I've read quite a few modern reworkings of fairy tales in a kind of feminist lens. I just like them, I guess, and this is one of my favorites. It takes what a fairy tale is at its essence, and she reworks it, the author reworks it, and she makes it better, and she makes it modern, and she updates it, and she incorporates it in lots of different questions and ideas and themes and things. And I'm just kind of rambling, and I don't know if any of this makes sense, but I really, really love this. And I think it's not the kind of collection that you should read if you just want to get it immediately. You know, like this is entertaining. Yes, I found these stories incredibly entertaining, but the most rewarding part was sitting down after I read the story and thinking about it, because allegory galore. It's not hard to understand per se, but there's quite a lot of things to think through and really consider after you finish a story and think about what the author's trying to say. It's really, really fun if you like kind of puzzling out the meaning of something and really enjoying the writing, and you know, every color means something, every scene means something. I would definitely recommend them. They are one of my favorite feminist-oriented fairy tale retelling modern collections. Yes. That was what I read recently. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to me talk about books. I enjoyed talking about books. Thanks for watching and have a good day.